You are the target. You are the target of Israel's most important battlefield, most important warfare campaign, and you're fair game. And they're going to use all the tools of warfare that they have at their disposal to target you and to get you to support Israel. And nowhere have you heard them talk about the importance of truth, the importance of fact-checking, citing sources, any of that shit, because that has nothing to do with it in their minds.
Ian Caroll just blasted Israel's playbook for propagandizing Americans, and in this clip, he gets into the idea that propagandizing the American mindset is the last frontier in a propaganda battle waged by Israel, having already captivated the totality almost of America's political class. What does this mean in a time in which many Americans are discarding the Israel first mindset? Let's take a look. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Benjamin Netanyahu is currently holding together a coalition government of a whole bunch of ultra-far-right groups that without them, he would not have been elected again. And he probably would have actually faced trial for his corruption trial, and he probably would be in jail by now. But instead, he allied with all these ultra-far-right, super extremist groups in Israel that came together and got him elected. Okay. And this is one of those groups, is my understanding. I'm not actually familiar with the New Hope Party, but the way they're speaking about them, that's what it's implied. And they were threatening to leave, and then they agreed to rejoin because Benjamin Netanyahu made a power deal where he said, I'll give you this if you give me that, right? Something that Benjamin has done a lot of. So, 20 times the budget for Hasbara in 2024. That's the kind of gravity that this situation holds for the Israeli government. It is an existential threat. The turning of American minds, I would almost say like the turning on of the American mind, the waking up of the American citizen is an existential threat to Israel. And if we start to examine the facts and get out of the Hasbara, they're fucked. And so they're 20xing that budget, right? I mean, just imagine. Imagine that you run a company, you've got a couple employees, and they do stuff. And something comes up this year, and you decide that all of a sudden you need to give 20 times the funding to that one department. 20 times. That's insane. That's completely insane.
Yeah, and it's not just that. It's buying Paramount and CBS, and Paramount's the parent company of CBS, putting Barry Weiss, the consummate neocon crusader, as the editor-in-chief of CBS, buying off the Free Press for $15 million, a YouTube channel that I don't think even does as well as mine does at times. That is what you get. You also get these crazy schemes in which Israel spends millions of dollars on a geofencing scam, a propaganda scheme to touch, 5% of the Christians in the United States by, taking over and hijacking their phones when they're in the vicinity of their congregations, inundating it with pro-Israel propaganda and, visuals from October 7th designed to tell the Hasbara tale. That's what we're getting here, so Ian's not misplaced in his trepidations toward this whatsoever.
Right? You run a restaurant and all of a sudden you're going to give 20 times the funding to your bar manager? The fuck is he going to do with it all, right? Not double, not 10 times, 20 times the Hasbara budget, okay? Let's pull this back up for you guys. Foreign ministry to receive massive budget for public diplomacy abroad. This is reported in the Times of Israel. Again, just reconfirming with multiple sources, 150 million, more than 20 times what such efforts have typically been allotted in past years. And again, the same report, actually, this is clearly this article from Jewish Chronicle is the exact same as this one. Yeah, they're pulling it from JTA there. So, Gen X girl, I'm going to pull up this actual post so that we can watch this video. The Eighth Front War. The idea of this Eighth Front War comes from our boy Jonathan.
There's an eighth front in this war. It might not be a terrestrial border that you can find on a map, but this domain is as volatile, is as violent, and is as vital to our future. The information sphere, the infosphere, is the eighth front in this war.
So, just in case you don't know, this man is Jonathan Greenblatt, and it says right there on his card, CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League. And if you don't know about the Anti-Defamation League, we don't even have the beginnings of the time to go into how fucked up the Anti-Defamation League is.
It sure is. And the idea here is that Israel's attacked 7 of its neighbors, including, the genocide in Gaza, which the U.S. is bankrolling, since October 7th. No normal country does that. No normal country tries to expand its settlements in this, this Israeli idea of Lebensraum to expand their territory. It's kind of the Israeli version of Manifest Destiny, and to use it with U.S. financing it and captivating and controlling our political class to do that through the Israel lobby, through AIPAC, the UDP, and other administrations. But the eighth front is what's most important to the true Israel firsters, because that's the propaganda campaign. They can't just unfurl these wars forever unless they have complicity from not only the political class, but the U.S. electorate that elects the political class. And it's a real problem for them that there's been a 50-point swing in terms of sympathy for the Palestinians since October 7th. So they have just ratcheted down and, expanded their budgets and expanded their resources to put it all into the propaganda campaign against Americans. That's what you saw when Netanyahu said, hey, we need to talk to Elon. Well, what did he mean when he said that in that group of influencers? Well, he means that we need to censor Americans. It's why Netanyahu said, I hope this TikTok deal goes through with Larry Ellison and Andreessen Horowitz purchasing it. Why? Because they're devout Zionists. They would hide the information that we were exposed to showing the Israeli atrocities there. That's just a fact.
They should be called the Defamation League.
And seizing the high ground in the fight for global public opinion is a battle that's as important to the long-term war as what you've done in Lebanon and Syria.
So he just said that seizing the upper hand in the information war is as important as the kinetic war, the actual war.
So one of the things we have fought now, a 7-front war, we have an 8th front. And that is the front in the battle for truth.
They'll just come out and say it just straight up front, that this is the 8th front. They look at America as a front. Despite, our prominent politicians calling them, our closest allies in the Middle East, they consider us a front in their war. It's an information war. And it's, pitting them versus us and our mindset toward our families, our communities. What we're paying for all these atrocities that go on in the Middle East in this criminal entangling alliance that regular Americans want none of, want no part of it. Good. We shouldn't have a part of it.
Christian influencers. Okay. You said, we talked about the woke right. And you said, I call it the woke Reich. That's a brilliant observation.
Brilliant observation. What he means is that's a brilliant piece of propaganda. That's a brilliant ad hominem, right? Because that's the bread and butter of Hasbara. Not the truth, not citing your sources, not accurate journalism. Notice how none of that Hasbara manual was about how to research the truth, how to cite your sources, be a good journalist, how to fact check things. None of it. That's not what it's about. It's about propaganda.
It absolutely is. And Max Blumenthal talks about this all the time. The fact that the Israeli regime actually loves anti-Semitism, loves to use that as a tool because they can just pin every criticism, legitimate criticism of Israel on anti-Semitism. And if you're going to just draw distinctions between, calling this massive and growing subset of the American right, the woke Reich, to divide them at a time when they actually have their senses and wits about them, to think that, hey, it's not exactly America first, especially when you're preaching that slogan, to shovel like $25 billion into the coffers of this genocidal maniac Netanyahu. when we're suffering through debt and inflation. National debt just crossed 38 trillion. Yeah.
The woke right, because these people, they're not any different from the woke left. I mean, they're insane.
They're insane. They're lunatics, and they're not any different than the woke left. Well, Benjamin, as a person that grew up around the woke left and knows them quite well, and who is now a proud member of the woke Reich, as you say, let's just say we're pretty different. And it's really not that hard to figure out. I mean, like, I walk around wearing shirts that say Patriot, carrying a gun, like eating meat with my bare hands, doing physical activity, reporting on, all these conspiracy theories that are very much not from the left. We're very different. There is sort of a horseshoe out there, but it's really just like a hollow ad hominem to try to say that the woke right and the woke left have anything to do with each other. Even the term woke right is a made up word that is actually a very woke tactic.
Yeah, that's the irony here. The truth is that it's indistinguishable from liberal wokeness. Remember when, conservatives just beat them up for, putting every single, obvious statement, like men can't get pregnant, there aren't 52 genders, and then the liberal wokesters would respond, oh, no, you're wrong, that's racism, that's sexism. You're homophobic, you're transphobic. They went to the race and class accusations without actually tackling the argument. That's the same exact thing that these supposed professors of the term woke right to demonize any legitimate criticism of Israel are doing. They're using that accusation of racism. They're just doing it in a slightly different flavor. The red flavor of woke is to call that anti-Semitism. Well, that's just anti-Semitic. You're criticizing Israel, the amount that the U.S. spends on Israel. Israel has a right to defend itself. Didn't you know that? You're just woke right. Well, that's indistinguishable from the liberal wokesters. That's the true woke right there.
Where you divide people into identity groups and make up weird little semantic games to try to say, you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say that. That hurts my feelings, right? The term woke right, as far as I'm aware, was made up by who? James Lindsay, right? I'm not going to start attacking James Lindsay's looks. Never mind.
But they're actually meeting on some of the things. And what we have to do is we have to secure that part of the base of our support in the United States. That is being challenged systematically. A lot of this is done with money. Money of NGOs, vast. Money of governments, vaster. Okay? We have to fight back.
Just think about that. He's talking about the money used to fight against Israel. When Israel controls so much of the money in American politics. Miriam Adelson giving Trump $100 million. AIPAC giving money to something like 70% of the sitting legislators. On its own website, they boast about essentially owning the voting patterns when it comes to Israel issues of 361 congressmen. That's something like, over 2/3 of the congressmen. And he's complaining about the money used to attack Israel. Just think about that. Israel owns the entire legacy establishment media. It's only been in recent days and in recent years that the independent media has displaced any idea of contravening the Israel first mentality that's been present in American foreign policy for essentially my entire lifetime.
How do we fight back? Our influencers. I think you should also talk to them if you have a chance. To that community, they're very important. And secondly, we're going to have to use the tools of battle. The weapons change over time.
We've been through this before. We've watched this clip before. The tools of battle, right? We're going to have to use the tools of battle.
You can't fight today with swords. That doesn't work very well, okay? And you can't fight with cavalry. That doesn't work very well. And you have these new things, like drones, things like that. I won't get into that. But we have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are the social media.
It says it right there. It's just like out in the open.
Yeah, this is a mass drop moment, and how dare he, this foreign villain, the supervillain responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths and bankrolling a genocide in Gaza with U.S. money to do it, coming here and considering us as targets of his battle, where he wants to use, quote, weapons of war, and he says they change over the time. And he's right about that. It's propaganda. So the American critics of Israel to him are the enemy, even though it's the critics of Israel here that are also bankrolling his slaughter in Gaza. What an ungrateful being, despite, outside of all of his treachery and murder sprees in the Middle East.
We have to use the weapons that apply to the battlefields where we're fighting. And the most important one is social media. The most important battlefield is social media, and the most important weapons are social media. And so what does that mean? That means that you are the target. You are the target of Israel's most important battlefield, most important warfare campaign, and you're fair game. And they're going to use all the tools of warfare that they have at their disposal to target you and to get you to support Israel. And nowhere have you heard them talk about the importance of truth, the importance of fact-checking, citing sources, any of that shit, because that has nothing to do with it in their minds. Because the thing is, imagine if you have social media occurring, right? And this is actually the tragic irony of this conversation becomes apparent pretty quickly as you think about it. Imagine you have all of social media and it's like a pool in front of you and we're all in there, spitting memes, making jokes, getting in arguments, having a good old time. Social media. And no one is doing any state-sponsored propaganda at all. It's just real, regular old conversations in social media, right? There'll be some truth going around. There'll be some journalism. There'll be some lies and incorrect shit. There'll be clickbait. There'll be advertising. There'll be all this shit, right? But ultimately, the journalistic spaces in an open social media environment with no outside foreign influences will largely just skew towards the truth because that's what everyone's job is. That's what everyone's there to do.
Yeah, I push back a little bit on that. There are, prophets of untruth and agents of untruth within the domestic populace, certainly the deep state and the legacy media establishment that's so intricately tied to the deep state and the CIA and all the games they tried to pull to propagandize us to, support Russiagate. I can't think that you could pin that on Israel. But certainly it makes the situation even worse when there are foreign agitators that want to sow propaganda amongst the populace, especially when it benefits from that. And Netanyahu does, Zelensky does, when they receive billions of dollars in American taxpayer money. It makes the situation even worse when that's prevalent. So I'm with Ian. There'd be a trend more toward the truth when there isn't foreign intervention there. But that's not to say that there isn't, bad sources of supposed truth or the science that we got from our internal, media agents without, foreign entities being involved as well.
And you'll always get some, assholes that are coming in and just like clickbaiting. You'll always get some people that are getting things wrong. That'll happen. But for the most part, if you don't do anything to that system, it'll just skew towards the truth. And the journalists that get the most truth right will rise and be popular. And certainly there will be people that will become popular because of their gimmicks and their clickbait and all these other things. But
yeah, that's the truth. I mean, truth is popular, taking out, the subsidies and the control and the government suppression of competition in this arena, which they do through the regulatory apparatus, by the way, and the FCC. They certainly do that. Without that, it's just what the consumer wants, what the consumer favors, what they desire, what they happen to like stylistically or content-wise is going to be what rises to the top. That won't happen when there's so much intervention, but he's right about that.
Why would you need to infuse millions of dollars of warfare strategy into the social media space? Right? Unless your goal was to subvert the truth. Because the truth is self-apparent. It's self-evident. We report on the truth for free, right? If it's true, you don't have to pay me to report on it. And if it's not true, you could never pay me enough to report on it, right? And so the very admission that they are going to first treat social media like warfare and that they're going to activate all of their possible weapons to target all of you with whatever it is they're doing, that admission alone tells you that they're paying to lie to you. They're paying to change your perspective and to change the nature of truth in our public square.
Yeah, I think Ian is really largely right here. There's so many great things that he brought up, but it is true. This is a war for information. It's not just a war of attrition in the Middle East, you know, wars in the West Bank to expand the West Bank settlements and, you know, expand those settlements in Syria and Lebanon in particular. It's not the genocide in Gaza. It's not even Israel bombing Qatar, which are all important, all treacherous, all things that would steer us away from the Israel first mentality, especially if we were a thinking populace that used reason to understand and realize that this doesn't benefit America in any single way, quite to the contrary, actually. But it really is the desperation of the Israel lobby. And I think that the erratic nature of it and the desperation and why they're openly saying this right now, that this is a battlefield. This is the eighth front in our war. This war to propagandize Americans through social media. That desperation is because there's a time constraint. They see this project, this Greater Israel project, which, you know, many of the right-wing Likudniks very much are interested in. They can't help themselves to talk about it. You know, Smotrich has just said that there's going to be Israeli settlements in Gaza, you know, since this ceasefire. They can't help themselves. You know, Ben-Gvir and Katz are talking about, you know, building a concentration zone in the ruins where Rafah once stood, and that they would annex Gaza, many of them flirting with that, passing legislation to that effect in the Knesset. They don't even hide it. But here's the thing. It's because American support is peeling away from Israel lately, especially among younger people. It's not even that ideologically driven right now. It's more driven by demographics and age groups than it is ideology, actually. And that's an empowering thing. That fact alone tells me this could be an important single-issue coalition for left-wing and right-wing dissidents to unite on. Even if we're not going to, you know, not unite on anything else, why not commit to this together with outstretched hands and, you know, in this quest to rid America of this Israel first mentality that's so pervasive in our political system? We could stand to benefit from that. And no one has to sacrifice their principles, by the way, on, say, economics or culture war issues on the left or right to do that. We can just fight this issue together and, hey, save fighting on those other things for another day. That's an empowering thing. But they see this, and it's not going to last. 10 years from now, the influence of the Israel lobby, I think, will be diminished. They can't stop it. They're not going to get all the information back in the hands of 3 media agents. Outright, utter totalitarianism. And that's always a potential, right? If we don't fight back against the information war. But the independent media is rising up and providing new voices and new things to consider in this arena and in the arena of foreign policy in general. So they view this time constraint as a catalyst to be more desperate, to be more outspoken about taking over social media before it's too late, before they never can fulfill and consummate fully the Greater Israel vision of expanding Israel's borders, even into Sinai and some of the maps that Netanyahu's held up, expanding West Bank settlements eastward and northward, and, you know, embroiling the U.S. in a regime change war in Iran. They want all those things, but they're not going to get it unless they really dig in deep. And I think that's what you're seeing now. And I think that's what Ian's recognizing. This is a real battle. Netanyahu's right about that, but they're viewing us indistinguishable as how they're viewing Palestinians that, you know, they kill relentlessly. But they need to propagandize. And that's to Netanyahu the most important of all of his wars that he's waging right now. So I think Ian's right on that. But what do you think? Let me know down below. Do you think Ian's right about this? Will the Israel lobby suffer in terms of influence over the coming years? Will it be even a few years or 10 years or 20 years? How long is it going to take? Let me know down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Ian. This was an awesome video. Thank you, Ian. If you liked this video, please consider becoming a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button below to support this channel. And in return for that, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. Also, if you want a free digital copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. The link is libertyvault.net. You get that free of charge, no obligation, $0. You just plug in your email, and I'll email that right to you. That tells the story of how the U.S. went from a decentralized constitutional republic into a very centralized world empire and what we can learn from that. So grab that down below. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.